In the Amazon, a living body can become more than prey. It can become a food source, a landing zone, a blood supply, a trap, or the first step in another creature's life cycle. Some attackers do not need to kill quickly. They only need access. A patch of skin, a resting body, a wound, a trapped insect, or a weakened animal can become part of a hidden system where feeding and reproduction are connected. This episode is about the Amazon creatures that use living bodies as resources, not always with dramatic violence, but with something colder, biology, turning flesh, blood, and helplessness into opportunity. Army ants change the feeling of the forest because they do not arrive like a single predator. There is no pair of eyes in the dark, no hidden jaw at the waterline, no one body waiting for the perfect moment. Instead, the ground itself begins to move. At first, it can look like a stain spreading through the leaf litter, a dark current slipping over roots, dead leaves, fungus, and fallen fruit. Then the pattern becomes clearer. Thousands of bodies are advancing together, each ant almost meaningless alone, but devastating as part of the whole. In the Amazon's small world, this is not just hunting. It is a moving food economy with legs. The forest floor is already crowded before the ants appear. Beetle larvae feed inside rotting wood. Crickets hide under curled leaves. Spiders wait in small silk retreats. Frogs sit low in the damp shadows, relying on stillness and camouflage. Small lizards warm themselves in thin patches of light, alert but not always fast enough. Every one of these animals is living inside a maze of scent trails, root barriers, wet hollows, and sudden dead ends. When an army ant raid enters that maze, it changes the rules. Escape is no longer just about outrunning one attacker. It is about escaping a front that keeps widening, splitting, reconnecting, and searching every gap that a frightened animal might use. The power of army ants is not individual strength. One worker can bite, pull, and hold, but one worker is not the nightmare. The nightmare is that contact becomes communication. A single ant meeting prey can recruit the body of the colony into the problem. Pheromone trails help organize the movement, turning scattered workers into flowing lanes of traffic. Some ants press forward, some carry fragments back, some defend the edges, and others keep the living road connected to the colony behind them. What looks chaotic from above is often a disciplined system shaped by chemical signals and constant touch. The swarm does not need a commander. The instructions are written through scent, pressure, and repetition. For prey, this kind of predator creates a different fear. A spider can be avoided by staying out of the web. A mantis can be escaped with one good jump. A bird can miss. But a swarm turns the entire surface around the victim into danger. An insect trapped under a leaf may survive one ant entering the space, then 3, then 20. A soft-bodied larva can twist and fold, but every movement exposes another surface to mandibles. A weakened frog can leap once and land ahead of the front, only to find the same living pressure spreading around it. A small lizard with an injury, a stuck foot, or a cold, sluggish body may lose the few seconds that make the difference between escape and being surrounded. Army ants are especially frightening because they are not interested in drama. They do not need to look heroic. They do not need a clean kill. Their hunting method is built on persistence and division of labor. Some workers grip, others cut, others pull pieces away. The prey's body stops being one animal and becomes transportable material. Legs, wings, soft tissue, larvae, eggs, and fragments of other insects can be carried back into the colony's system. That is the brutal logic of swarm life. The individual disappears into collective survival. A body that once moved for itself becomes fuel for thousands of mouths, including larvae hidden deeper inside the colony's temporary living structure. This is where army ants fit skin nursery in a larger, colder way. Mosquitoes use blood to make eggs. Vampire bats take from a living body without needing to kill it. Assassin bugs and spiders turn prey into chemically processed food. Army ants scale the idea up into society. They do not just consume, they distribute. Prey becomes part of a reproductive engine much larger than the animal that caught it. The colony has larvae to feed, workers to sustain, soldiers to maintain, and a queen whose egg production depends on a constant supply of nutrition moving inward from the raid. The victim is not simply eaten at the point of capture, it is broken into the future of the swarm. In many army ant colonies, home itself is not fixed in the normal sense. Some species form temporary living nests or bivouacs made from the bodies of workers linked together around the queen and brood. That detail makes them feel less like animals living in a house and more like a house made of animals. The colony can shift between phases, sometimes staying in place while brood develops, sometimes moving with astonishing coordination when the demands of the young change. The raid on the forest floor is only the visible edge of a much larger cycle. What the camera sees as a black-red wave across leaves is connected to hidden hunger, developing larvae, queen production, and the colony's need to keep moving through a landscape that can be stripped of easy prey if it stays too long. The Amazon does not treat army ants as a private event. Their raids pull other animals into motion. Insect prey flee ahead of the swarm, and that panic creates opportunity for birds. Antbirds are famous for following army ant columns, not because they eat the ants, but because the ants flush insects from cover. A grasshopper that might have stayed hidden all day suddenly jumps, and a waiting bird snatches it from the air. A cockroach bolts from leaf litter and is taken before the ants ever reach it. The army ants become beaters in a hunt they do not consciously share. Their movement rearranges the forest around them, forcing hidden life into the open and feeding animals that have learned to read the swarm as a dinner bell. That does not make the ants servants of the birds. It shows how one predator can become an ecological disturbance that many others exploit. The swarm is like a storm moving through the understory. Some creatures flee, some hide, some follow, some die. Even animals too large to be serious prey often react to the approaching front, stepping away from the irritation and risk. The ants are small, but the colony creates presence. It changes behavior beyond the reach of its jaws. That is real power in an ecosystem, not only killing, but making other animals move. The ants themselves also live under pressure. Their raids are dangerous. Workers can be crushed, eaten, stranded, drowned in sudden water, or attacked by other insects. The colony survives because the loss of individuals is built into the system. This is one of the most alien parts of swarm life from a human point of view. An individual worker can be sacrificed without the colony collapsing, because the colony's real body is distributed across thousands of individuals. The ant that dies under a frog's foot is not the central unit of survival, the colony is. Evolution has shifted importance away from the single body and toward the living network. For the prey caught inside that network, the experience is the opposite. Its entire world is still trapped inside one body. One wound matters, one pinned limb matters. One missed escape route can end everything. This imbalance is what makes the encounter so severe. The prey fights as an individual. The ants feed as a collective. The victim has one nervous system trying to solve a crisis from all sides, while the swarm has thousands of small decision points, each one reacting locally and pushing the larger machine forward. The result is not elegant, but it is efficient. By the time the column moves on, the forest floor can look strangely normal again. Leaves settle, birds drift away. The smell of crushed vegetation and disturbed soil fades into the damp air. What remains may be only fragments too small to carry, or nothing obvious at all. The body that was caught has been converted into motion, food, brood, and future workers that may one day join another raid. That is the deeper horror of army ants. They do not simply kill a helpless animal, they absorb it into a moving society. In the Amazon's smallest corridors, the swarm proves that survival is not always about the strongest individual. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that has stopped being an individual at all. The Amazon does not need darkness to become dangerous. Sometimes the first threat arrives in full daylight, thin as a needle, light enough to land on skin without being felt, and patient enough to wait for the exact moment when a warm body becomes useful. Mosquitoes are easy to dismiss because they are small, but that is exactly why they belong at the entrance of Skin Nursery. They show the idea in its simplest form. A living body does not have to be killed to be used. It only has to be found, entered, and converted into fuel for another generation. In the heavy air near a blackwater stream, the forest seems to breathe through everything at once. Leaves drip even when rain has stopped. Mud holds the shape of tracks from animals that passed hours earlier. Tree roots rise from the ground like wet ribs, and every hollow, footprint, bromeliad cup, and still puddle can become part of a hidden reproductive map. For mosquitoes, this is not just scenery, it is infrastructure. The Amazon provides shade, humidity, standing water, and a constant movement of warm-blooded animals. Mammals, birds, reptiles, and even humans pass through it, carrying heat, carbon dioxide, sweat chemistry, and blood. To a female mosquito, those signals are not random traces. They are directions. The bite itself is almost offensively small compared with what it represents. A female mosquito does not take blood because she is simply hungry in the ordinary sense. Many mosquitoes can survive on plant sugars for energy, feeding from nectar and other sweet fluids. Blood is different. Blood is construction material. It contains proteins and nutrients that help develop eggs. That means the host's body is being used as a biological supply depot. A capybara resting near the waterline, a monkey shifting in the canopy, a bird tucked into vegetation, or a person standing too still in the evening heat can all become part of the same reproductive transaction. The mosquito lands, probes, feeds, and leaves behind a tiny wound that feels minor to the victim but carries enormous meaning for the insect. Finding that wound site is where the mosquito becomes more impressive than its size suggests. It is not flying blindly through the forest hoping to get lucky. It is reading the environment with specialized sensory equipment. Carbon dioxide from breath can draw it from a distance. Body heat helps refine the target. Moisture, skin odors, lactic acid, and other chemical traces help confirm that this is living tissue worth investigating. Movement can matter, but stillness can be dangerous too, because a resting animal gives the insect time to close the distance. The host may feel like it is doing nothing, but biologically, it is broadcasting itself. Every breath expands into the humid air. Every warm patch of skin becomes a signal. Every exposed ankle, ear, eyelid, or patch of thin fur becomes a possible feeding point. When the mosquito reaches skin, the scene becomes microscopic but not simple. The mouth parts are not one plain needle. They are a set of fine tools working together, sliding into the surface and searching for blood beneath it. Some parts help pierce, others guide, and others deliver saliva that changes the local battlefield. That saliva is one of the most important details because the host's body is not passive. Blood clots, vessels react. Immune systems notice invasion. The mosquito must interfere quickly enough to keep the meal flowing. Anti-clotting compounds and other saliva components help make the bite possible, and the swelling itch that follows is often the host's immune system reacting after the insect has already taken what it came for. The discomfort is late news. The robbery has already happened. That is what makes mosquitoes such a perfect opening to this episode. They do not look like monsters. They do not need claws, fangs, coils, or brute force. Their horror is procedural. They follow signals, access tissue, manipulate blood flow, and leave to continue the reproductive process elsewhere. The host may slap, scratch, shake, or retreat, but the mosquito's strategy does not require a dramatic victory. It only needs enough time to feed. In a forest filled with larger predators, this is a quieter form of exploitation. A jaguar must risk a chase. A snake must commit to a strike. A caiman must hold its prey through violent resistance. A mosquito can turn the edge of a living body into a temporary resource and disappear before the body fully understands what happened. The Amazon makes this strategy even stronger because water is everywhere, but not always as rivers. Mosquito larvae do not need a grand lake or a wide swamp. Many species can use small pockets of still water, a flooded hoofprint, a tree hole, a curled leaf, a discarded shell, a rain-filled depression in bark, or the tiny reservoir held inside a bromeliad. In those miniature nurseries, larvae hang and wriggle beneath the surface, living in a world that can fit inside a footprint. They feed, grow, avoid tiny aquatic predators, and wait for transformation. The adult mosquito that later rises from that water may enter the forest as a flying needle, but its beginning was aquatic. That life cycle ties skin, blood, rain, and standing water into one continuous system. There is a strange ecological irony here. Mosquitoes are hated because of the bite, and even more because some species can transmit pathogens, but they are also part of the food web. Their larvae can be eaten by fish, aquatic insects, and other small predators. Adults can become food for bats, birds, spiders, dragonflies, and frogs. In one direction, they are parasites taking blood from larger animals. In another, they are prey, transferring energy upward into the forest. The same insect that turns a mammal's skin into a feeding site may later become a meal for a frog sitting motionless on a wet leaf. The Amazon wastes very little. Even irritation has a place in the system. Still, from the host's perspective, the mosquito remains disturbing because it reveals how exposed life really is. Skin feels like a boundary, the line between the body and the outside world, but to a mosquito, it is only a surface to be solved. Fur, feathers, sweat, movement, and immune defenses all complicate the attack, but none of them erase the opportunity. The mosquito does not need to overpower the whole animal. It only needs to find a weak point in its outer defenses for a few seconds. In that moment, the host is not prey in the classic dramatic sense. It is not being dragged away or swallowed. It is being sampled. That is the first truth of skin nursery. The body can remain alive, mobile, and apparently in control, while another organism quietly uses it to build the future. The mosquito turns blood into eggs, eggs into larvae, larvae into adults, and adults back into hunters of heat and breath. The cycle is small, but it is relentless. In the Amazon, danger does not always announce itself with jaws opening in the water or eyes shining from the understory. Sometimes it arrives as a faint whine near the ear, a touch too light to respect, and a bite so small that the body notices only after it has already become part of something else's beginning. Night changes the Amazon in a way daylight never fully explains. The same forest that looked crowded, green, and restless under the sun becomes deeper, quieter, and more difficult to read. The river loses its bright surface and turns into a black, moving skin. Branches blend into one another. The air cools just enough for warm bodies to stand out in a different way, and animals that spent the day hidden begin to move through spaces that now belong to them. This is where bats enter Skin Nursery from a darker direction. They do not need a wounded animal, a dead animal, or a dramatic struggle. They need stillness. They need access. They need a living body relaxed enough to stop defending every inch of itself. In the Amazon, bats are not one thing. Some skim fruit from the canopy and scatter seeds into the forest like night gardeners. Some hunt insects in bursts of sound too high for human ears. Others visit flowers and carry pollen through darkness, helping plants reproduce while most of the forest sleeps. But among them is one of the most unsettling specialists in the mammal world, the vampire bat. It is not large, it is not built like a movie monster. That is the point. Its entire advantage is precision. Where a jaguar uses muscle, a vampire bat uses stealth, heat detection, sharp teeth, anticoagulant saliva, and patience. It survives by finding the smallest possible opening in another animal's defenses. A resting mammal on the forest edge does not look helpless. A tapir, capybara, deer, or sleeping livestock animal still has weight, lungs, muscles, and blood pressure. Even asleep, the body is alive with systems working beneath the surface. Blood moves warmth toward the skin. Breath releases moisture and carbon dioxide. Small shifts of the body expose thinner patches of skin near the legs, ears, neck, or feet. In daylight, those details may not matter. At night, they become part of a map. A vampire bat moving low through the dark is not searching for a battle. It is searching for a place where the body has forgotten to guard itself. The bat's approach is almost stranger than flight. Vampire bats can move on the ground with surprising control, using their folded wings and limbs to crawl, hop, and reposition themselves near a host. This matters because a direct landing on a sleeping animal could trigger panic. A heavy touch, a loud flutter, or a clumsy impact would ruin the whole strategy. Instead, the bat can approach like a shadow with bones, staying close to the ground, testing distance and choosing the safest angle. It is a mammal feeding from another mammal, but the scene feels less like a predator attack and more like a quiet piece of biological trespassing. The wound is not made with brute force. Vampire bats have sharp front teeth that can shave a small patch of skin with remarkable efficiency. They are not trying to tear flesh apart. They are trying to open a shallow feeding site and keep blood moving long enough to drink. Their saliva contains compounds that interfere with clotting, which means the host's normal repair system is delayed. Blood is supposed to seal damage quickly. That is one of the body's most basic defenses against injury. The bat's saliva turns that defense into an obstacle that can be chemically softened. The bite may be small, but the strategy behind it is highly evolved. Make a wound that the body cannot immediately close. This is why bats fit skin nursery so well. The host remains alive, breathing, and often unaware, while its blood becomes fuel for another animal's survival. There is no need to kill the body because death would actually ruin the arrangement. A dead host stops producing warmth, circulation, and fresh opportunity. A living host is better. It continues to pump the resource the bat needs. That is the uncomfortable truth behind this chapter. Not every predator wants the whole animal. Some only want the body to keep working while they borrow from it. Vampire bats also reveal how evolution can refine senses around a very specific problem. Darkness alone is not enough to stop them, because many bats use echolocation to build a sound map of the world. But blood feeding requires more than avoiding branches. The bat has to identify a host, approach without triggering movement, and locate a warm feeding area where blood vessels are close enough to the surface. Heat-sensitive structures around the nose help with that final choice. To the resting animal, skin is a protective covering. To the bat, it is a landscape of warmer and cooler zones, each one suggesting what lies beneath. The body becomes readable not by sight alone, but by temperature, smell, sound, and behavior. There is also a social side to vampire bats that makes them more complex than simple villains. Their feeding life is risky. A bat that fails to drink blood can become weak quickly, and repeated failure can be dangerous. In their roosts, vampire bats are known for food sharing, with successful individuals regurgitating blood meals to others that did not feed. That sounds unpleasant, but biologically it is extraordinary. A creature built around blood theft also survives through social cooperation. The same animal that slips through the night to feed from a sleeping host may return to a colony where memory, recognition, and social bonds influence survival. The horror has a nervous system, but it also has a society. The wider forest does not pause for this exchange. Insects continue to call from wet leaves. Frogs sit like polished stones near water, waiting for anything small enough to swallow. Owls and snakes hunt through the same darkness. A bat feeding at ground level is not safe just because it has found a host. It is also exposed. A false movement, a sudden kick, a predator's approach, or a shift in wind can end the opportunity. The bat's delicacy is not kindness, it is risk management. The less disturbance it creates, the longer it can feed, and the better its chance of leaving before the night notices it too. For the host, the immediate wound may seem minor, but the relationship is not harmless. Blood loss from one feeding is usually small, yet repeated feeding can weaken animals, and open wounds can invite secondary problems. In many parts of the Americas, vampire bats are also important because they can transmit rabies, which turns a quiet feeding strategy into a serious ecological and veterinary concern. That is another reason this animal cannot be treated like fantasy horror. The real version is already disturbing enough. It is not frightening because it is huge. It is frightening because it is efficient, medically relevant, and perfectly adapted to a niche most mammals never entered. The night version of Skin Nursery is therefore colder than the mosquito's doorway. Mosquitoes turn skin into a checkpoint for egg production. Vampire bats turn sleeping flesh into a renewable feeding site. Both depend on living bodies, but bats add a different layer of intimacy because this is mammal feeding from mammal, warmth reading warmth, blood supporting blood. The forest does not present it with thunder or violence. It happens under leaves beside riverbanks, near sleeping animals whose breathing remains steady while another creature carefully opens a small door in the skin. By morning, the Amazon looks alive in a brighter, more familiar way. Birds call from the canopy, mist lifts off the river. Tracks appear in the mud, and the night's work begins to fade into signs too small to notice unless someone knows where to look. A tiny wound, a faint stain, a restless animal shifting at sunrise. The bat is gone by then, folded into a roost somewhere in the dark architecture of the forest. The host continues moving through the world, still alive, still breathing, but no longer untouched. For a few quiet minutes in the night, its body became a resource, its skin became an opening, and its blood became part of another animal's survival. The Amazon has a smaller world beneath the obvious one. Below the height of a jaguar's shoulder, below the wings of macaws, below the green roof where monkeys move through vines, there is another battlefield spread across leaves, bark, moss, and damp soil. It is a world measured in millimeters, but it is not gentle. A fallen branch can become a hunting corridor. A curled leaf can become a blind corner. A patch of lichen can hide legs, antennae, and a weapon held tightly under the head. This is where the assassin bug belongs. It does not dominate the forest through size. It dominates through access, chemistry, and patience. At first, it can look almost harmless, just another angular insect moving slowly across the wet surface of a leaf. Its body is narrow and armored, its legs placed with a careful, deliberate rhythm, its long beak folded beneath it like a tool waiting for use. But that folded proboscis is the entire story. The assassin bug is built around the idea that prey does not need to be torn apart from the outside. It can be opened with one precise strike, chemically altered and drained while the outer shape of the body still remains recognizable. In the miniature world of insects, this is not messy violence. It is engineering. A small caterpillar feeding along a leaf edge may never notice the danger until the distance has already closed. Its body is soft, full of stored plant energy, and focused on feeding. Around it, the forest is filled with signals, vibrations through the leaf, changes in light, the scent of crushed vegetation, the tiny movements of ants and flies nearby. But the assassin bug does not need to rush. Speed is useful in the strike, not in the approach. Its slow movement is part of the hunt. It reduces disturbance. It turns the predator into another piece of the leaf litter, another stick, another shadow in a place already full of strange shapes. When the strike comes, it is brutally simple. The assassin bug drives its proboscis into the prey and delivers saliva that begins to change the victim from the inside. This is the key difference between a bite that removes flesh and a feeding method that transforms tissue into liquid nutrition. The saliva can contain enzymes and compounds that help immobilize prey and start breaking down internal structures. The victim is not swallowed whole. It is processed in place. The body becomes a sealed container where digestion begins before the meal has even left the prey's own skin. That is what makes the assassin bug feel so surgical inside Skin Nursery. The mosquito takes blood to make eggs. The vampire bat opens a small wound in a living mammal and keeps blood flowing. The assassin bug brings the idea down into a harsher, smaller theater, where the living body becomes not just a resource, but a temporary vessel for digestion. The prey's outer surface still marks the boundary of an animal, but inside that boundary, chemistry is taking over. The fight may continue with twitching legs, flexing segments, or desperate contractions, yet the outcome is already shifting away from strength and toward biochemistry. The proboscis itself is not a casual mouthpart, it is a controlled instrument. Many predatory true bugs use piercing, sucking mouthparts, But assassin bugs have turned that basic design into a hunting weapon. Instead of chewing prey into pieces, they inject, wait, and drink. It is a different relationship with food. A mantis grips and bites. A spider may wrap and venomize. An assassin bug anchors itself to the prey through a narrow point of contact and lets fluids become the meal. This is why the scene can look strangely calm from a distance. There may be no explosion of shredded wings or scattered body parts. Just two insects locked together on a leaf, one holding access, the other being quietly converted. Some assassin bugs make the strategy even stranger by using disguise. Certain species cover themselves with dust, plant fibers, dead insects, or debris, turning their own bodies into moving trash piles. Others may use the remains of prey or environmental material to confuse enemies and approach victims. In a forest where almost everything is being watched by something else, looking unimportant can be a weapon. A bug that resembles a scrap of bark or a clot of dust does not trigger the same alarm as a clean, obvious predator. The Amazon rewards animals that can disappear without actually hiding. The assassin bug does not only hunt with its mouth, it hunts with shape, texture, and patience. This matters because the small world is crowded with danger from every direction. Ants patrol stems in organized lines. Spiders wait beneath leaves and inside silk retreats. Wasps inspect cracks and cavities. Frogs sit close to the ground, ready to turn any careless insect into a tongue-length mistake. A predator as small as an assassin bug is never only a hunter. It is also potential food. Its slow, precise behavior is not laziness. It is survival discipline. Every unnecessary movement can reveal it. Every exposed feeding moment carries risk. While it drains one victim, it must avoid becoming another animal's easy meal. The ecological role is more important than the horror suggests. Assassin bugs help regulate populations of other insects, including herbivores that feed on leaves and stems. In the Amazon, where plant life is constantly under attack from chewing mouths, sucking mouthparts, larvae, beetles, and caterpillars, predators like assassin bugs are part of the hidden pressure that keeps feeding from becoming collapse. A leaf that survives long enough to photosynthesize is not protected by one defense alone. It is protected by chemicals in the plant, by ants, by wasps, by spiders, by birds, and by small predators like this one, each applying pressure in a different way. The assassin bug is one blade in a much larger immune system of the forest. There is an irony in that. The assassin bug's method feels cruel because it is intimate and slow, but the forest is built from these exchanges. Plant tissue becomes caterpillar tissue. Caterpillar tissue becomes assassin bug nutrition. The assassin bug may later become food for a bird, frog, or spider. Nothing stays in one body forever. Energy moves through the Amazon by being captured, defended, stolen, digested, and recaptured. The assassin bug simply reveals that movement in a way that is hard to ignore because it turns digestion into something visible while the prey's body is still present. By the time the feeding is finished, the scene may leave very little drama behind. The prey's outer shell or softened remains may still cling to the leaf, but the usable contents have been removed. The assassin bug cleans its weapon, folds the proboscis back beneath its head, and returns to the broken geometry of stems and shadows. The forest around it continues as if nothing special happened. Rain beads on the leaf surface. Ants cross nearby. A fly lands and lifts off again. From a human distance, the moment would be easy to miss. But at the scale where the Amazon does much of its quiet work, a body has just been turned into a feeding chamber. That is the ugly precision of this predator. It does not need to overpower the forest. It only needs to understand one small point of entry better than its victim understands defense. In Skin Nursery, the assassin bug shows that a living body can become useful long before death is obvious. The prey is not simply eaten, it is accessed, altered, and drained through a wound so small it almost looks impossible. The Amazon's smallest hunters do not need spectacle. Sometimes the most efficient violence in the forest is a beak, a hold, and chemistry doing the rest. The Amazon is full of traps that do not look like traps until something touches them. A vine can hide a snake, a fallen log can hide jaws, a still patch of water can hide a waiting mouth. But the black widow's trap is different because it is not built from camouflage alone. It is built from architecture. The web is not just a place where prey happens to get caught. It is an extension of the spider's body, a sensory net, a restraint system, a warning device, and eventually a processing site. In Skin Nursery, this matters because the prey does not become food in one clean moment. It becomes property first. In the darker edges of the forest, where roots twist into pockets of shadow and dead leaves collect under logs, silk can turn empty space into a weapon. The threads may look fragile, almost accidental, especially compared with the clean circular webs people imagine when they think of spiders. But widow webs are not made for beauty. They are tangled, irregular, and practical. Their strength is not in elegance, it is in control. A small beetle, fly, cricket, or moth moving through the wrong gap does not meet a clean wall. It meets a system of lines that pull from several directions at once. One leg catches, then another. A wing beats, the body twists. The web answers by tightening. That is the first cruel intelligence of silk. Struggle is information. Every vibration travels through the web and reaches the spider like a message written in movement. A leaf falling into the threads does not move like an insect. A raindrop does not pulse like a trapped fly. A living victim creates rhythm, panic, weight, and resistance. The spider does not need eyes locked on the prey the way a cat watches a throat or a hawk watches a field. The web feels for her. It translates the prey's body into vibration, and the spider reads those vibrations from her hidden position, waiting until the risk is low enough and the opportunity is clear enough to approach. The prey may still be alive and strong, but strength is almost useless when it has no direction. This is what makes the black widow's hunting style feel colder than a chase. In a chase, the prey still owns its movement. It can turn, leap, dive, or vanish into clutter. In the web, movement becomes a debt. Each kick can wrap a leg deeper. Each wing beat can press the body against more threads. Each attempt to pull free can spread the contact points until escape becomes less a question of power and more a question of geometry. The insect is not beaten by one massive force. It is divided into tiny failures. When the spider moves in, the scene becomes even more controlled. The widow does not need to rush in like a reckless predator. She can test the prey through the web, approach from a safer angle, and add silk where the victim still has leverage. Wrapping is not decoration. It is the removal of options. A pinned leg means less kicking. A trapped wing means less vibration. A bound body means the prey can no longer decide where the fight happens. Once enough control is gained, the bite becomes part of a larger sequence, not the whole event. Venom helps disable the prey, but the web has already done half the work by taking away escape. Black widow venom is famous because it affects nerves, and that makes the animal easy to exaggerate into pure horror. But the real biology is already sharp enough. For small prey, venom is a practical tool for immobilization. It interferes with normal signaling between nerves and muscles, turning the victim's own control system against it. The body that moments earlier was kicking and twisting begins to lose coordination. Insects rely on fast nerve communication to move legs, wings, jaws, and defensive reflexes. When that control falters, the web becomes even more absolute. The prey is still a body, but no longer a body fully commanding itself. Then the feeding process begins to reveal the deeper logic. Spiders do not chew prey like mammals tearing meat. They feed largely through external digestion. After immobilizing the victim, the spider can release digestive fluids that begin breaking tissues down into a form she can draw in. The prey remains inside its own outer shell for part of this process, but the meaning of that shell has changed. It is no longer protection, it is a container. The insect that entered the web as a living animal becomes a sealed package of nutrients being chemically prepared from the outside and within. That is where skin nursery turns from blood and wounds into storage and processing. The web itself makes this possible because it buys time. In many predator-prey encounters, time is dangerous. A predator that holds prey too long may be injured, interrupted, or forced to fight harder than the meal is worth. A widow web changes that equation. It allows the spider to separate capture from consumption. The prey can be secured now and eaten later. The spider can wait until movement fades, until the victim is safer to handle, until the forest around her settles again. In that sense, the web is not just a trap. It is a pantry built from protein thread, a private structure where another animal's body is held between life, death, and digestion. There is a strange economy to it. Silk is expensive for a spider to produce, but it pays back through control. Each thread is a material investment, and widow spiders place that investment where insects are likely to move, close to ground clutter, protected corners, crevices, logs, stones, and vegetation edges. These are not random places. They are traffic lanes in the small world. Insects pass through them while searching for food, shelter, mates, or egg-laying sites. The spider does not have to patrol the forest like an ant column or chase prey like a robber fly. She builds a machine and lets the forest walk into it. That machine also has enemies. A black widow is not untouchable. Wasps may hunt spiders. Birds may pick them from cover. Other spiders may invade. Ants can become a serious threat if they locate the web in numbers. Even the act of feeding carries risk because a large insect can damage silk, bite, kick, or attract attention. This is why the spider's behavior is so careful. She is dangerous, but she is still small. Her power comes from reducing risk before direct contact. The web is her armor, her alarm system, and her distance weapon all at once. The Amazon's smaller predators often show this pattern. Survival belongs to animals that can outsource part of the fight to a tool. The assassin bug uses a proboscis and chemistry. The mosquito uses saliva and sensory tracking. The vampire bat uses stealth and anticoagulants. The black widow uses architecture. She turns air into structure, structure into restraint, restraint into time, and time into food. That sequence is what makes her chapter different. The horror is not only that prey is bitten, it is that the prey is held inside a world the spider has made, and every rule inside that world favors the builder. By the time the feeding is over, the web may hold only a dried remnant where an active insect used to be. A shell, a wing, a bent leg, a small piece of the forest's energy emptied and left behind. Around it, the Amazon keeps moving. Rain taps leaves, beetles climb wet bark, moths drift toward pale gaps of moonlight. Somewhere nearby, another thread waits with no sound, no smell, and no warning that means anything until contact is made. The black widow does not need to own the whole forest. She only needs a few inches of space where silk decides what happens next. By the time scarabs enter the story, the chase is usually over. The bite has already happened. The struggle has ended. The body, the dung, the wound, or the softened remains have been left behind in the wet heat of the forest, where nothing stays untouched for long. This is why scarabs make a darker ending for Skin Nursery. They are not always dramatic killers, and they do not need to be. Their power comes after the obvious violence, when the Amazon begins its quieter work. What looks like waste to one animal becomes a signal to another. What looks like the end of a body becomes the beginning of feeding, breeding, soil building, and another generation rising from matter that seemed finished. On the forest floor, decay does not wait politely. Warmth speeds chemistry. Moisture softens tissue. Fungi spread through fallen material. Bacteria begin breaking down what larger animals leave behind. Flies arrive quickly, ants patrol the edges, and beetles push through the leaf litter with the strange confidence of creatures that know the forest's leftovers are never really leftovers. Scarabs belong inside this hidden economy. Some are drawn to dung, some to rotting fruit, some to carrion, some to decomposing plant matter, and some to the rich mixture of organic material that builds up in tropical soil. They turn the ugly remains of life into movement, eggs, larvae, and nutrients returned to the ground. The most familiar version is the dung beetle. And in the Amazon, this role is far more important than people realize. A tapir feeds on fruit and leaves, moves through the forest, and leaves behind a pile of dung full of partially digested plant material, microbes, moisture, minerals, and sometimes seeds. To most animals, it is something to avoid. To dung beetles, it is a fresh opportunity with a clock ticking. The smell spreads through humid air, and beetles can arrive with astonishing speed, guided by chemical cues that mean food, competition, and reproduction all at once. The forest may look calm from above, but at ground level, a new resource has just entered the system, and the race has begun. The beetles do not treat dung as garbage. They treat it as architecture material and baby food. Some carve pieces away and roll them into balls. Others tunnel beneath the source and pull dung underground. Others remain close, feeding and breeding near the pile itself. The famous rolling behavior is easy to turn into comedy because the beetle looks absurdly serious while pushing a ball larger than its own body. But there is nothing foolish about it. That ball can become a protected packet of nutrition. In many species, females prepare brood balls where an egg is laid inside or near the stored material, giving the larva a ready food supply when it hatches. The young beetle begins life inside a nursery made from what another animal expelled. That is the uncomfortable genius of scarabs. They do not separate waste from life. They collapse that boundary completely. Dung becomes food. Food becomes a nursery. A nursery becomes a beetle. The beetle becomes prey for birds, frogs, lizards, spiders, and mammals. Nutrients that pass through a tapir's gut can move into soil, plants, insects, and predators, traveling through the ecosystem in forms that keep changing. The Amazon is not clean in the human sense, but it is efficient in a deeper biological sense. It wastes almost nothing because every abandoned material becomes available to something with the right tools, senses, and life cycle. Scarabs also work below the surface, where their importance becomes less visible but even more serious. When dung beetles bury material, they are not just hiding food from rivals, they are changing the soil. They move nutrients downward, improve aeration, and help organic matter enter the root zone where plants and microbes can use it. In a rainforest, where so much life is stacked above poor, quickly washed soils, this kind of recycling matters. Heavy rain can strip nutrients away, heat and moisture can break material down rapidly. The forest survives by moving nutrients fast, capturing them again and again before they disappear. Scarabs are part of that recovery system. They are small engineers working under the leaf litter. There is another layer that makes them even more valuable. By removing dung from the surface, dung beetles can reduce breeding opportunities for some flies and parasites. This does not make them heroic in a sentimental way. They are not cleaning the forest out of kindness. They are feeding and reproducing, but the side effect is ecological order. A pile of dung left exposed becomes a magnet for flies, pathogens, and competitors. A pile broken apart, buried, and converted into beetle brood changes the balance. The beetles are not outside the mess. They are the mechanism by which the mess becomes useful. In Skin Nursery, this takes the episode to its final truth. Earlier, the living body was exploited directly. Blood taken by mosquitoes, skin opened by bats, prey liquefied by assassin bugs, insects stored in silk, helpless animals absorbed by army ants. Scarabs show what happens after even those moments are over. The body still matters. The waste still matters. The remains still matter. Nothing simply exits the rainforest economy. A corpse can feed larvae. Dung can cradle eggs. Rotting fruit can pull beetles from darkness. A softened body can become food for scavengers, then soil, then plant tissue, then fruit, then animal flesh again. The line between death and birth is not clean here. It is muddy, crowded, chemical, and alive. The forest floor makes that truth visible if the camera stays low enough. A scarab pushes through wet leaves under a fallen branch, its armored body shining with mud and moisture. Around it, fungal threads lace through rotting wood. Ants test the ground with antennae. A tiny frog waits near a root, watching for movement small enough to swallow. Somewhere above, fruit drops from the canopy with a soft impact, adding sugar and pulp to the damp layer below. The scarab is not the biggest animal in this scene, but it is connected to nearly everything in it. It touches waste, soil, plants, microbes, and predators without needing to understand any of them. That is why ending with scarabs works better than ending with another obvious killer. A final predator would only repeat the violence. Scarabs widen the idea. They show that Skin Nursery is not only about attack, it is about conversion. The Amazon converts blood into eggs, prey into stored food, waste into brood chambers, remains into soil, and soil back into forest. The horror is not that something dies, everything dies. The horror and the wonder is that the body never fully leaves the system. It is claimed, divided, softened, buried, eaten, and rebuilt into something else. By morning, the surface may look almost untouched. Rain has flattened the tracks, leaves have shifted. The dung pile is smaller or gone. A carcass has changed shape. A patch of soil has been opened and sealed again. The dramatic part has vanished, but the real work continues below. Scarab larvae feed in darkness, wrapped in the material that will build their bodies. Roots press through enriched soil. Fungi and bacteria continue their invisible labor. The forest stands above it all, green and immense, because beneath it there is a constant machinery of breakdown and return. Scarabs close the episode with the Amazon's most ruthless lesson. Life here does not end neatly. A body can be prey, shelter, food, signal, fertilizer, and nursery, depending on who reaches it next. The same forest that creates beauty also dismantles everything that falls into it, not with cruelty, but with total efficiency. In this world, nothing is allowed to remain only itself for long. Everything becomes useful. Everything becomes part of the next hunger, the next egg, the next root, the next wing moving through the dark.